You're scrolling through social media, birthday parties with 15 people, group trips, inside jokes in comment sections, weekend plans that require a group chat. And you're watching from the outside, not because you weren't invited, but because somewhere along the way, you stopped trying, stopped showing up, stopped pretending that most social interactions felt like anything other than performance art. And the worst part isn't the loneliness. It's the quiet question that creeps in when you're alone at night. Is something fundamentally broken in me? If you've gone months, maybe years, with few or no real friends, if your contact list is full of names you haven't spoken to in ages, if the idea of making small talk at a party sounds like psychological torture, listen carefully. Because what I'm about to explain isn't a diagnosis of what's wrong with you. It's a recognition of what's different. And that difference, it might be the most psychologically sophisticated thing about you. Let's establish something critical right now. Having few or no friends doesn't make you broken. It doesn't make you antisocial. It doesn't make you a failure at being human. In many cases, it means your brain operates on a frequency that makes conventional friendship feel draining, inauthentic, or fundamentally incompatible with how you process connection. And the reason you feel isolated isn't because you lack social skills. It's because you refuse to settle for the performance most people mistake for friendship. Today we're breaking down 5 psychological traits that are significantly more common in people with small or non-existent social circles. These aren't deficits, they're distinctions. We're talking about why your tolerance for fake behavior is neurologically lower than most people's, why your brain requires more recovery time after social interaction, why you genuinely rather be alone than surrounded by people who don't understand you. Because here's what research is finally starting to confirm. Friendship isn't a universal need distributed equally across all personalities. For some people, the cost of maintaining it exceeds the benefit. And recognizing that isn't cynicism, it's self-awareness. Trait number 1. You have developed what psychologists call authenticity hypersensitivity. This is where your brain has become exceptionally skilled at detecting performative behavior, manipulation, and social masks. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Most people can tolerate a certain level of social theater, the polite lies, the strategic friendships, the surface-level conversations where everyone's performing their highlight reel. But your nervous system registers this kind of interaction as fundamentally exhausting. Research in social psychology shows that as self-awareness increases, tolerance for inauthentic behavior decreases dramatically. It's not that you've become judgmental, it's that you've become perceptive. You notice the micro-expressions that don't match the words, the compliments that carry subtle hostility, the friends who only reach out when they need something. Your brain processes social interactions like a lie detector, constantly cross-referencing behavior with intent, and most of the time, the data doesn't match. So you make a calculation. Is it better to participate in friendships that feel like elaborate performances, or is it better to be alone? And for you, solitude wins, not because you hate people, but because you've realized that loneliness with integrity feels better than connection built on pretense. You're not avoiding friendship, you're avoiding the emotional labor of pretending that shallow counts as substance. Trait number 2. Your brain is wired for conversational depth in a world optimized for breadth. Cognitive scientists have found that individuals with certain personality structures, particularly those high in openness and introspection, experience what's called topic saturation fatigue. This means that surface-level conversation doesn't just bore you, it actively drains your cognitive resources. Think about the last time someone asked how you were doing, and you knew they didn't actually want an answer. They wanted a transaction. A social pleasantry that keeps the interaction moving without requiring emotional investment. For most people, this is fine. For you, it's unbearable, because your brain doesn't engage unless there's substance. You don't want to discuss weather, weekend plans, or surface observations about reality TV. You want to talk about ideas, systems, why people do what they do, what it means to live a meaningful life. And here's the problem. Most people aren't capable of that kind of conversation. Not because they're unintelligent, but because they're not wired to find depth rewarding. They experience small talk as connection. You experience it as noise. So instead of forcing yourself into conversations that feel like intellectual starvation, you withdraw. You wait. You hold out for the rare person who can match your conversational frequency. And if that person doesn't show up, you'd rather stay silent than settle for static. Trait number 3. You have what neuroscientists call elevated social processing load. This is where your brain expends significantly more energy during social interactions than the average person. While extroverts experience social engagement as energizing, your nervous system treats it like a marathon. Every conversation requires active listening, emotional attunement, subtext analysis, and constant monitoring of social cues. And all of that happens simultaneously, beneath your conscious awareness. Research on introverts and highly sensitive people shows they process stimuli more deeply across all sensory channels. You're not just hearing words. You're analyzing tone, facial expressions, body language, what's being said and what's being carefully avoided. Your brain is running multiple parallel processes while the other person thinks you're just having a casual chat. And when the interaction ends, you don't feel recharged, you feel depleted. This is why you need extended recovery periods after socializing. It's not antisocial behavior. It's neurological necessity. Your brain burned through resources that need to be replenished through solitude, silence, and the absence of social performance. Most people don't understand this because their baseline is different. They think you're avoiding them when really, you're just trying to recover from the last interaction so you have enough energy to function. Trait number 4, you demonstrate what psychologists call autonomous self-regulation. This is the ability to maintain emotional stability, motivation, and sense of self without requiring external validation from a social network. Most people derive their sense of worth from how others perceive them. You derive yours from internal metrics, competence, integrity, alignment with your values, and this makes friendship optional rather than essential. Studies on self-determination theory show that individuals with high autonomy needs are less dependent on social approval for emotional regulation. You can entertain yourself, you solve problems independently, you find meaning in solitary pursuits, reading, thinking, creating, exploring ideas that don't require an audience. This doesn't mean you're incapable of connection. It means you're capable of something most people never develop, genuine self-sufficiency. And because you don't need friends to feel complete, your standards for who gets access to your life become extremely selective. You're not collecting acquaintances to fill a void, you're protecting space that's already full. Your inner world is rich enough that adding people to it feels like clutter unless they genuinely enhance what's already there. Most people can't understand this because their inner world feels empty without external input. Yours doesn't, and that's not isolation, that's integration. Trait number 5, you operate with what researchers call an elevated trust threshold. And this is where things get psychologically complex, because this trait can come from two very different places. Sometimes it's wisdom, sometimes it's wounding. And until you know which one you're dealing with, you won't know if your friendlessness is a choice or a defense mechanism. People with few friends often share a common history, betrayal, emotional neglect, or prolonged exposure to toxic social dynamics. When trust gets violated, particularly in formative years, the brain develops protective patterns. You start testing people before letting them in. You observe longer. You require consistent behavior over extended periods before you're willing to be vulnerable. Psychologists call this hypervigilant attachment, and it's a completely rational response to having been hurt. But here's where the shadow work comes in. Are you maintaining high standards because you've learned to value quality over quantity? Or are you using those standards as armor against the risk of being hurt again? Because there's a difference between discernment and avoidance. One comes from strength, the other comes from fear. And if you're honest with yourself, you probably know which one is running your life. If past wounds have convinced you that all people are dangerous, that vulnerability always leads to pain, that it's safer to be alone than risk connection, then your friendlessness isn't a preference, it's a prison. And recognizing that doesn't mean you need to force yourself into friendships that don't serve you. It means you need to heal the part of you that's still protecting a wound that's already scarred over. But for those operating from genuine autonomy, not trauma-based isolation, there's something powerful happening in your psychology. You've developed what evolutionary psychologists call selective sociality. Throughout human history, survival required tribal belonging. But in modern society, where basic needs are met independently, the pressure to maintain large social networks is cultural, not biological. Which means you're not rejecting connection. You're rejecting the exhausting performance of maintaining relationships that don't actually enhance your life. Research shows that quality of social connection matters infinitely more than quantity. People with one deep friendship report higher life satisfaction than those with 20 surface-level connections. You've intuitively understood this. You're not failing at friendship. You're succeeding at prioritization. You're saying, my time, energy, and emotional bandwidth are finite resources, and I'm not going to waste them on relationships that feel like obligations rather than additions. So here's what this actually means. If you have few or no friends, it doesn't indicate a deficit in social capability. It indicates a difference in social architecture. Your mind works with heightened awareness, deeper processing, stronger autonomy, and more selective criteria. You have a richer internal landscape, sharper pattern recognition, and more developed self-reliance. These aren't consolation prizes for being lonely. These are actual psychological advantages that come with a specific cost. Fewer people will understand you. And that's the trade-off you've unconsciously accepted. You'd rather walk alone with clarity than walk surrounded by confusion. You'd rather have silence than noise disguised as connection. You'd rather protect your peace than sacrifice it for social acceptance. That's not dysfunction. That's discernment. That's someone who's figured out that their internal world is worth protecting, even if it means the external one looks emptier than most people's. You're not broken because you don't have friends. You're not antisocial because you can't tolerate shallow interaction. You're not failing because you'd rather be alone than perform connection you don't feel. You're someone who's learned that authenticity matters more than popularity, that depth matters more than breadth, that your energy is too valuable to waste on people who don't actually see you. Tell me, Do you have few or no friends? And if so, which of these 5 traits resonates most with your experience? Drop it in the comments, because maybe the most powerful thing we can do is stop apologizing for walking a path most people are too afraid to travel alone. If this explains something you've never been able to articulate, subscribe. If you enjoy this level of behavioral analysis, there are several videos on the channel you'll find just as insightful. I'm already working on the next one, and I promise it'll be just as eye-opening as this one. I'll see you there.